Welcome to the Coach Dave Love Podcast with NBA shooting coach Dave Love and your host, Matt Robertson. Exploring the cutting edge of evidence-based shooting development in basketball today. From shooting form to skill acquisition to shot metrics. This is the Coach Dave Love Podcast.
Welcome to the Coach Dave Love Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Robertson, and with me today is NBA shooting coach Dave Love. Dave, what's going on?
Hello, Matthew. One thing I'm really enjoying is that we're starting to get into little routines, and like the way that you say "Welcome to the Coach Dave Love Pod" is becoming like your little signature, and I'm digging it. So
I appreciate it.
How are you?
Also well. Dad beard, full force, having a good time. Just really, on the coffee today. What's going on with you? Where are you today?
I'm in Calgary, Canada. I leave for Las Vegas this evening, so we're sneaking in a quick podcast with a very special guest that I feel like we need to get to right away because he's a big deal and he's got a heart out. The lingo.
It's our first heart out.
Yeah. So everybody, welcome Phil Beckner. Phil is somebody that I have admired from a distance for quite a while, like a number of years, and then we've connected a little bit here and there, Phil and I, and then in the last month, I feel like we've stepped on the gas of a friendship around our jobs, and so when we had a couple of conversations, I'm like, this is a conversation that we need to have on the podcast. Phil Beckner, probably best known as being Dame Lillard's guy. I don't want to put a title on. So you tell me, what is your job description, Phil?
Good question. I always give Dame crap about it now because people always say I'm Dame's trainer because obviously he's a great guy, humble dude, and he's mentioned me way too much, in interviews and whatnot. So unfortunately, I've been labeled Dame's trainer, and so half the people don't know my name anymore. But no, I think what I call myself, I'm just a player development coach. I coached college for 10 years, had some pro experience as well with the Thunder and their G League team, did some stuff with, the 76ers as a consultant. But I'm just a guy who shows up and tries to make players better both on and off the court.
So you are like the most famous or best known for that, but that's certainly not all you do. That's how you would describe yourself. How do other people, other than Dame, describe because we've talked about this a couple of times. How would other people describe your job or give your job title?
Yeah, Dave, I mean, we're going right into these conversations you and I have been having the last month, but I'm passionate about this because, I run a little bit of a coach's mentorship group. We do some clinics in Phoenix. Obviously, you and I, met in Phoenix the one time. I think it was maybe right after COVID. We just spent a little bit of a day together in the gym, had a few guys in there. But now in our profession, the title that everyone says is trainer. There's this new, kind of basketball profession the last 5-6 years where you're just a trainer. And what I think, and maybe I'm a little old school, but what I think, it needs to form into is like, hey, we're all coaches. And that's something you and I have talked about. I call you a shooting expert. Some people call me maybe a player development expert. But at the end of the day, we're still coaches. We're still teachers of the game. We're still individuals who are trying to take a person, and I think this is a great definition of a coach. We're individuals who are trying to take a person to somewhere they maybe couldn't get on their own. So that's why they've chosen to work with us and trust us and build a relationship and build connection and allow us to teach them, coach them, and hold them accountable.
We're gonna dive into all this. I feel like I want to spend a couple of minutes just talking about your background. I know Matt has a question that he loves to ask, so I'm going to let him ask it first, and then we'll build off of this.
So okay. I do have one quick anecdote before I get to the question, and I did reference this in our little pre-show meeting. But so I like to think I'm a pretty big NBA fan, like in the top 10%. I know the 12th guy on whatever Charlotte, that's, I kind of pride myself in that. And when we started this process, I didn't recognize your name, and I did some reading. And one of the players you'd worked with had said, no, people know who he is. I just wish no one did, because I want to spend more time working with him. And for me, that was such validation, like, oh, this guy's the truth. And then I kept diving, and I just really impressed with your work. So that's just, fan service number one. Appreciate your time. My favorite question to ask to kind of get started is, as a former hooper, like, what is your archetype? So just to like give you, a little look at it, like I was a like poor man's, like homeless man's Steve Novak, like no defense, all camp me out in the corner, discount, double check, full deal. Like, what was your basketball archetype when you were a player?
Yeah, I was straight. I probably thought I was a little bit better than I was. Like I played college. My claim to college basketball fame. I ask this all the time when I speak. I ask the kids or the players, how many games do you think I won my senior year of college? And the answer was 2. We didn't win a game second semester. And a guy I admire a ton, and have worked with a ton, Doc Rivers, he's always said, and other coaches have said this, you learn more from losing than you do winning. So I was like, hey guys, I got all the losing out of the way for my career. But, I was your 6'3", just typical kind of wing. Back then, kind of 2s and 3s were somewhat the same. It wasn't, as much of a positionless game, but could really shoot the ball. And then I just had a mean shot fake, jab, 1 or 2 dribble pull up. And after that was about it.
My man.
At what point in your career, Phil, your playing career, did you start to realize coaching was going to be a thing?
You know what? During my college career, during the summers, I would help coach a little bit of AAU. I'd always worked at like youth centers and rec centers too for my college job. And I love coaching. I love, and especially, and Dave, you and I have talked about this. And I think this is where you excel at what you do, because there's a ton of shooting coaches and shooting gurus, or skill development coaches and skill gurus. And a lot of people can coach, or they could motivate, but I think very few can teach. And they don't have progressive teaching patterns or linear teaching patterns. And so I went to college to be a teacher, actually. I knew I would want to coach someday. And obviously, I'm getting a little bit older now, but back then, if you wanted to coach, like, you needed to have like a teaching degree, or, be able to start at the high school level. So as far back as I could remember, and as long as I know in college, I knew I wanted to coach. But the biggest thing I wanted to do too is be a great teacher.
Can you just really quickly, I'm still, part of the great journey of this podcast is learning all of the skill acquisition sort of movement and data. You mentioned progressive and linear. Can you just really quick give me the elevator pitch of what those are?
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep it really, really simple. One of my mentors gave me a great phrase. I actually just talked to my accountant about this. It's about to be tax. And I said, guys, I'm not the smartest person in the world. Explain this to me like I'm a truck driver. And I'm like, well, hold on. Nothing against truck drivers, but like us as coaches, we're not the smartest guys all the time. So when you talk about linear progressions, or, one thing we're big on is shooting progressions. Everyone always asks about, how did you build this range, this deep shooting range with Damian Lillard, and even Anthony Simons and some other guys are able to do it now. I think it's a step-by-step progression. Linear means one after the other. One big thing we believe on and off the court, like, we are not going to skip steps. So we're not going to go step 1 and then, hey, let's just have fun today, and I want to convince you I know what I'm doing, and we're going to skip to step 4. So when you're building a skill, or even building a habit, or especially as we even try to coach mindset quite a bit, we want to do things in a progressive order. So, and again, here's where, Coach Dave, will probably chime in, but as simple as form shooting or foundation shooting, if that's step 1, the coach or the trainer should be asking, what is step 2? I think too many guys do step 1. They'll start with some basic, great fundamental progression or linear step, but then they go ahead and skip 4 or 5 steps. And then you're already getting away from the habits or the things you're trying to teach.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've seen, that we do a serviceable job. I think we can do a lot better job of, like, what is the purpose of form shooting? And then a lot of coaches try and apply that into a game setting. And those are the two steps in their mind. Learn the perfect shot, apply it into a game setting, and they don't learn the bridge, or they don't teach the players the bridge to get the habit to a game setting. And so I totally agree with that. And then I try and focus. You mentioned linear progressions, and if you look at what I do over a long period of time, you'd probably see a very linear progression.
Yeah.
And then if you look at it within like little micro doses or micro cycles, you're probably going to see a little bit more nonlinear. That I'm constantly testing. Are we capable of moving to the next level yet? And sometimes we are. Sometimes I've attempted to move too early, and we have to take a step back. And that exploration, I think, is really, really important. But over the course of the mesocycle, it is very linear. So, yeah, I agree with what you're saying here.
I just saw a graphic about a month ago on social media, and I think it's exactly what you said. Everyone has seen the graphic on social media where they're like, hey, people think success looks like this, and it's an arrow just heading up. And then the other, they're like, what success actually is this squiggly line. But I saw a different one, and I've shared this with players, and I think it's exactly what you've talked about, especially with shooting development. When you like zoom in and look at it micro, day to day, day by day, exactly what you were talking about, those are all over. Those dots are all over the place. Monday might be up, Tuesday might be a little lower, Wednesday's in between both. But when you look at it in the totality of their development over the span of months and years, now it's more of a linear progression. When you zoom in, there's a million ups and downs. And as you know, whether it's shooting, skill development, performance development, any of that, too many guys are basing all of their success or all of their emotional feelings based on one day or one performance. And that's where, we got to come in and be a little bit of a psychologist as well. And be like, hey, over the year, like you brought up, Matt, you brought up Matisse Thybulle, man, his percentages are kind of, I don't want to use this word, but like finally great. But man, sometimes, some days he was ready to kick a ball, walk out of the gym, say this isn't working. But now you look at it over the last 2 years, you're like, oh, this guy just took off. It's like, no, he didn't. And Coach Dave, you had a great way of saying that. And I just say you kind of zoom in and look at each day and having to test those guys to see where they're able to go and if they're ready for the next step. And that's what a lot of players and coaches are missing especially in shooting development.
Coach Dave kind of has talked about that day to day as sort of exploring the edges of the sandbox. And I really like that analogy where like we kind of want to be in the middle of the sandbox. That's where we're comfortable, but also to grow, we have to kind of explore the edges. Yep. And also what you said that I really loved is like, I sent Dave a picture of my kid when it was born a couple months ago. And he was like, oh, it's going to be really cool to see him every 5 or 6 months because the growth is so drastic when looked at over those large sort of zoomed out periods where for me it's like, oh, you see him every day, the new stuff is fun, but you don't get to see those big jumps because you're in it every day. So I really love how you said that.
Phil, I'm curious, based on what Matt just said. I had somebody ask me this a couple times in the last week. How do you track workouts or track growth, or do you?
Absolutely. We track it. And again, going back to a little bit of a more of an old school approach, one of the college teams I consult with, we just started talking, they didn't make the tournament. So we're talking about their off-season program, and they're trying to balance how much ball handling they get in, how much finishing, how much conceptual development they get in, and still get it, how much shooting. We have come up with a few different drills. Everyone has drills everywhere, but we call them either score or time standards, and they're a measuring stick. So we've done it based on, movement type of shots. We've based it on dynamic type of shots. We base it on time, hurry shots, like how many threes can you make in 3 minutes, different stuff like that. And one of my assistants who's been with me for a long time, we keep track of every guy's score every day. Every time they shoot one of those drills, and, we've trained some guys for 5 or 6 years now since I've left college basketball. We have all their scores over time in an Excel sheet, but then we also have all of the records too. Like, hey, who has the record for this? So it's competitive. It gets them engaged. And as you know, working especially with pro clients, that's a different dynamic sometimes because these guys play so much basketball. And I think a challenge is to get them to, like everyone says, you got to work at things game speed, which you and I both know you don't build every skill set game speed, starting off with. But at the end of the day, there are times we want them to have that game speed, but also game kind of engagement, in their mind. Like they are engaged competing because your mind starts racing a little bit faster. So it always comes back to score time or score standard, based shooting drills, and we keep track of them. Almost a test.
How many, if we take a month, logistically, how many times would each player be doing one of those tests? Like if we just took one of those tests, how often would they be doing that?
Phenomenal question. And you said I get to ask you some questions, so now I'm getting anxious. I already want to throw some stuff at you. Phenomenal question, and I want to know if you hate this answer or not. It's different for everybody.
I love that answer.
Do you? Because that's the thing. Everyone wants this A to B to C. You got to do it this way. The question I get the most from college coaches who hire me as a development consultant with their kids, they want to know what to do and exactly how much to do it. And I don't think that's a correct answer. Like, I don't think there's just one answer.
Totally agree. Yeah, I've talked with a lot of skill acquisition people over the last couple of years, and I'm going to them wanting a black and white answer of like, how do I coach better? Like, how do I use periodization, or how do I talk about knowledge of process, knowledge of results, all these different things? And I'm annoyed because the answer I get back most of the time is, well, did what you did work?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, no, tell me what I should be. Give me the black or white answer. And they're like, there's no black or white answer. There's shades of gray, which is exactly what we're seeing. It's different for every single player. That there are some guys I would not track anything for a month-long period of time. And then there's some guys where they track to motivate, track to learn. And then we could even talk about when do we share that information that we're tracking, when don't we? Any thoughts on that?
That's funny you said, because that's it. While you said that, that's exactly what I was thinking of. A guy I worked with a lot when he was in Phoenix, Mikal Bridges. He was the guy you came to the gym, you saw that day, and he was an improving shooter throughout his career. And I wasn't the only one who worked with. He's worked with other great coaches as well. But once he got pretty good, I want to say like year 2 of training him, I would send him way more scores kind of as a reminder, confidence building, accountability thing than year 1. It's like, hey, these don't matter. You shoot it, people say you shoot it too slow, or you bring it up funny, or let's just get it, straight, smooth, and consistent. And that's another thing too, a little bit of a tangent here, but you talk about skill acquisition, and I think to really connect and accelerate the progress of a player, just like coaches have a certain terminology in their program, offensively or defensively, you have to have that developmentally. I think there are certain words that will trigger guys. Here's a great example I'll share with you guys. Dame has had an up and down year with the Milwaukee Bucks. New team, 2 new coaches, new situation, personal struggles, all this different stuff. And I asked him, I go, hey, when we train, I'm going to come see you 10 days a month. Every time we train, or every time we go through a film session, whether we're talking about shooting, whether we're talking about pick and roll playmaking, or just getting better that day, what would a couple words be you want to approach every day with? And he was like, fast, fluid, and free, or maybe it was fast, smooth, and free. And this was a few months ago. And so like, I will literally take those 3 words, put them on a graphic, and be like, hey, any drill we do or anything we approach, I might have some technical terms and really try to help you sharpen some stuff, but man, we're still doing them fast, fluid, and free every day. And that's your approach. So just like you talked about the gray area, we also have to find their area where their brain clicks and be able to kind of live and survive in that gray area as we're figuring things out together, again, to accelerate progress.
I'm really curious, Phil, because I guarantee you've been in this situation. We never talked about this, but like you're describing empowering the athlete and like an athlete-led model, which I totally agree with. But sometimes the athlete's off the mark. So, for example, you're meeting with a new guy, and he's a 52% free throw shooter. And he's talking about, I really want to extend my range outside the arc. And you're like, I don't know if this is necessarily the logical starting point. How would, when you've empowered the athlete, they've given their feedback, and you as a coach just know that's not what we're going to be doing. How do you handle that conversation?
I've had to grow in that, because when I was a college coach, it was my way or the highway. But especially when you're talking about two things. One, and I'm reading a bunch on this right now, Coach Dave, just like kind of today's athlete, today's kid, today's generation. I think when you look at this, there's one way in dealing with pro players who are, smart, been there, maybe already locked into what they want to do. But then also you just look at today's player and today's kids. Everyone wants an explanation. Everyone, we're not lacking information. All the information and ideas are already out there. Who could take them and use them? So here's what I've done, and my mentor, Rod Olson, has helped me with this a ton. I start when they are way off base. I just drill them with questions damn near until they feel inadequate and they can't answer the question. And he's been this one motivationally. It's called the 5 whys. Like a kid will be like, I want to make the NBA. Well, why do you want to do it? Well, because it's always been my dream. That's just one why. If you ask them 5 whys and you get them to keep talking, eventually they're going to be like, I want a bunch of money and status and cool Instagram. You never know. But if you're not willing to drill these dudes with questions initially and almost kind of expose them, I think you're going to be fighting an uphill battle to get them to be like, hey, you're 50% from the free throw line. Let's worry about taking care of step A and B before we get to step C and D.
I really love that approach. And it is so difficult when you're dealing with players because, as you know, like depending on the level, depending on the player, the amount of ego and pride sort of varies, and it's really hard to hear sometimes. And as a former player, I love to think that I was a really coachable guy and but like there was still some times where a coach would give me some feedback that I'm like, looking back, he's right. Still doesn't hurt any less to hear. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, I really want to get to your questions, Phil, and I hate to interrupt this conversation because it's flowing so well, but we need to take a really quick break. So let's do that, and we'll be right back.
Hey there, basketball fans. I'm NBA shooting coach Dave Love, and I've got exciting news just for you. Introducing my exclusive, free basketball shooting newsletter. It's packed with insights and techniques straight from the hardwood. Have you ever wondered how NBA players improve their shots? Or how you could get to the next level, whether you're a college player, a coach, or a budding youth player? My newsletter brings all this and more directly to your inbox. Each edition is a deep dive into the world of basketball shooting. I'll share some of the tips and ideas that I use with my NBA clients, tailored for every level of the game. But wait, there's more. Subscribers receive exclusive monthly discounts on my online products. From training videos to personalized coaching sessions, you'll get it all for a fraction of the price. And the best part of all, it's absolutely free to join. So what are you waiting for? Elevate your game and join a community of passionate players and coaches from around the globe. Signing up is easy. Just visit CoachDaveLove.com.
Welcome back. It's one of the great joys to have all the power, but also this conversation is great and I hate to interrupt. So Phil, you came prepared with some questions. I want to give you the platform to pepper Coach Dave. What did you come with today? I'm really curious.
All right. The first one, and again, these are questions I hate sometimes because everyone, just like going back to our talk, they want this specific great answer. But
Uh-huh.
Coach Dave, and this is selfish a little bit, what does day one, and again, I know it's different players like we just talked about, what does your typical day one look like with a guy? First time you're ever on the court with them?
On the court, I will have watched every piece of video that I can find on the guy. Like I'll have watched every free throw and three from the previous season that I can find. And if there's not all that, if they're for whatever reason not on Synergy, then you're going to YouTube just to search for like that one clip that might give you a shot. I'll be going in with an idea of what I think I need to work on based on what I've seen, but those usually, especially the TV camera angles, tend to lie. They don't show a flat shot to the magnitude that it is flat. They'll make it look like it has more arc on it than it does. You can't see how the ball is moving. So in that first, well, I guess before we even get there, it'd be conversation. Like I'll be asking sort of the guided questions that you're talking about. Like, what do you feel like you need to work on? What have other coaches told you that, what do you think is holding you back? Giving a little bit of my input. And then on the floor, I set the goal of 10 minutes. Rarely do I make it to 10 minutes where I just want them to do what they do. Let me now see you in person, up close, where I can move around and stand different places to see different things. Let me see what you normally do, to see if what has been shown on video is actually the truth, or if the video's lied to me, or if there's little details that I couldn't have seen. And then try to identify. I start with the ball. How does the ball move? Does it have enough arc? How is it rotating in the air? How is their body moving the basketball? Where are the big sources of negative energy being created? And then once I kind of have an idea of where I think we need to start mechanically, then it's expressing that to players, showing them why I think it matters through video or through just manipulating their body and kind of getting their permission to, are you on board with this? Like, does this make sense to you? And then starting to isolate that habit and re-coordinate the movement pattern in small doses.
Phil, what does that look like for you? Sorry to interrupt you.
Can I make one point first? I just think,
No.
and I think it's good to hear this. And Coach Dave and I think both have a passion for helping other coaches. That's why he's doing this and growing our game. The thing you said, Coach, and I didn't want to interrupt you because you were rolling, but asking the player what other coaches have told them, what other coaches, are emphasizing with them, what they've liked, what they have, like, that's $1 million question for me. That's something I do with every guy, even to the extent and I'm so big on connection and reaching these guys. I worked with Oregon football a little bit as a consultant. I know nothing about football, but we know how to reach, and develop players and staffs. And Mario Cristobal, who's now at Miami, as the football coach there, he always had a phrase. He said, "We're going to fight for the space between their ears harder than anyone else in the country." And that question, knowing what was already in between their ears, I think if you want to change behavior, you have to know what's previously influenced that behavior. So asking those questions, and then I always took it a step further, then take them to lunch right after that first session. And Coach Dave, you'll love this. I'd be like, "Hey, who are some of your favorite coaches and why?" And then be like, "Hey," and Matt, like you were just saying, sometimes you didn't want to hear it from a coach. "Hey, who is that coach that you couldn't stand and why?" "This dude coached me. He always showed up and wanted to tell me what to do right away and wouldn't let me get warmed up." I'm like, "Well, guess what? I'm gonna make him warm up tomorrow." So you get those answers. And Dave, and I think this is what happens. You, Coach Dave, you've done it for so long. I know you're humble. You don't like being called an expert, but you are one. But those little things you do naturally day to day, or day by day, a lot of young coaches miss. Like they forget to ask those questions in the first 20 minutes of a workout. Man, what have other coaches been telling you? What do you think works? What doesn't work? Like, to be able to unpackage that a little bit. So, sorry, Matt, I completely forgot what you asked me, but I just thought that was so huge that he said that. I wanted to elaborate on it.
No, please. The people want to hear from you, and that's an incredible point. And again, as a coach who's still learning, and I've coached at a variety of different levels, but still learning. What a valuable thing to get feedback from the player before addressing them. Like, it's such a simple concept, but it just makes so much sense. I was curious, your first day with a guy, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, a little bit different because, like, and Coach Dave, you could maybe elaborate this on the podcast, like you've talked about on some of our phone calls. We're both doctors, but we both do stuff a different way. How did you say that? What was that? Because that'll kind of allow me to answer that.
I'm always hesitant to say it because I worry it's going to sound condescending. But you took it with the spirit that I intended, which is we're both doctors. In the shooting realm, I might be more of like the specialist, whereas you're more of the general practitioner. And that's, I don't want that to sound like it's condescending, because the general practitioner can handle so many more things than the specialist does. And that's where, like, I think we both get labeled shooting coaches, but there are certain players, and probably more players, that you're going to be able to reach and help. But I think I'm really good with a certain kind of player so I've rambled too much, but that's how I kind of have looked at it.
That's what I wanted you to explain, because it answers or allows me to answer Matt's question. Because when I first step on the court with a guy, and again, a lot of guys come to me for shooting now, or growing their game, or trying to find that little bit that will take them from good to great, or great to elite. I do three things every time. We're going to handle the heck out of the ball, just moving, walking into, allowing them to make mistakes, because I always think there's a nervous energy. And man, I know we could go on for days with this stuff. Going back to what you were talking about a little bit ago, though, Matt, you're like, you didn't want to hear stuff from a coach sometimes. Or I think the two biggest things that hold players back on the court developmentally, it's either one, immaturity, or two, insecurity, or both at the same time. If they're immature or they're insecure, it's going to be hard to get them better. So I try to do a ball handling routine where they make mistakes, and we always say we're going to applaud those mistakes so they drop their guard. And they're like, oh, okay, I don't look dumb. Okay, I don't look like a bad player. Everyone makes all these mistakes in our little ball handling, and it's not some YouTube crazy ball handling crap. Like, none of that, hey, we got a spatula and a hot air balloon and all this stuff going on. We're literally just doing fundamental ball handling, but we're losing the ball. Second, from there, we very basic touch shot finishing drill. And it is a little bit of an assessment thing, because I want to see if their ball and their body are connected. Coach Dave just brought up where they losing negative energy from. I would rather try to learn that a little bit in finishing, just doing a little kind of touch shot, floater, jump hook drill, more than like, hey, let's move out to three and go ahead and expose your weakness and make you feel insecure. So we do that. And then after that, I will literally, brand new guy, first day, I'll literally let them shoot 100 to 150 shots, not makes, about 100 and 150. Let them do that. Let them completely feel comfortable, because Dave, you made the greatest point. Like, they might try to come in and do something a little different than they had been doing in the game to impress you or show you. But after you get to about that 75th to 80 rep, they're going to be like just doing what they do habitually. And now I see what they say. And Matt, I'm giving you all my secrets here. Then I go up to them after about shot 75 or shot 80, and I go, hey, can I give you one thing? And I ask. And as soon as they say yes, they've given me permission to coach them. So now I could hold them accountable as well and be like, well, you said I could give you the one thing. Now you're not doing it. What are you paying me for? What did you hire me for? And that's where maybe it's getting the feet a little bit more square. Maybe it's like, hey, I just want your eyes up earlier. Maybe it's, hey, we're just going to try to hold the ball a little bit higher. Just one simple thing they could do to feel comfortable with and start building some confidence with.
Phil, can
That's
we get
very cool.
technical on a couple of things here just in the last? I know you need to leave in a couple of 10 minutes or so. Can I ask your permission to get technical?
Absolutely, because my next question for you is technical. So here we go.
Okay, so I have my 3 shooting non-negotiables, and we've done a podcast on it. People can go back and listen to it. Like 3 things that I think every shooter needs to do. And this really came out of like when that's the question that most coaches ask. Like, if you could only coach to 3 things, what 3 things would you want to do? And the answer is really it's different for everybody, but I'm trying to give them an answer. Do you have anything like your shooting non-negotiables, like a list of things that you need people to be able to do? Anything like that?
Yeah, we going back to progressions. We have a whole series. I actually haven't put it on video. You saw some of it. We call it foundation shooting. But though it's a progression type shooting drill, I'm in Milwaukee. I'm going to do it with a couple guys, with Dame and a couple other guys today. Simple form shooting, simple base and balance stuff. But those are just drills. Those are just progressions. We talk about 2 things that go into those. One, teaching points, which kind of you're somewhat referring to. And then 2, I think overall, me and even my 2 assistants who work with me in Phoenix, we don't call them non-negotiables. We call them absolutes. Just a few absolutes you have to have. I would say, and I'll share just kind of our 3 biggest absolutes. One is eyes, like having your eyes up. 2 is posture and placement, the posture of your body and where you place the ball, just very very basic things. And then the third one is base and balance. Are you sitting down, similar to posture, but base and balance? Are your feet into the floor? Are you generating force through the floor? So eyes, placement and posture, and base and balance.
I love it.
What are your podcast? What are your 3 non-negotiables? So ours were more absolute, what we look for, but what are your 3 non-negotiables?
Be as balanced as possible. Shoot the middle of the ball with the middle of your hand, and lift the ball up in the air. How you go about doing those 3 things might vary from player to player, but you have to get the ball in the air. You want to make more shots. You got to try and be stable, and if you want to release the ball well, you've got to push through the middle of the ball. Otherwise, the ball is going offline.
We talk about a very similar teaching point. We say shoot through the ball. Like it has to move. Like we want to shoot through the basketball. Matt, I think you're going to ask a question, but maybe we just do session 2 too, guys. Like we do part 2. Come back someday and do one. But Coach Dave, you said this earlier. In one of your first workouts, you want to identify or communicate where the negative energy is. So if I've never coached or what is the number one common thing that you see negative energy the most in? Where like what's the number one you see the most in shooters?
Younger players, they don't get the middle of their hand underneath the middle of the ball, so their shooting hand is pushing one side of the ball more than the other, which is going to push the ball offline or require a guide hand to push in the opposite direction. That's probably number 1 for young players. For guys we're working with, usually lower body balance stuff, that they just, in the situations that they're faced with, their foot positioning and their body posture isn't allowing them to stop the massive amounts of negative energy they create by moving on the floor before they start the shooting motion. And they're never going to do it perfectly, but like a lot of guys aren't in a position to be stable given the amount of force they can generate into the shot.
100% agree. Awesome. Really good.
So Phil, one of the things that like I think most coaches or most fans don't understand is players they're not always doing exactly what we want them to do. That there's a compromise, and there's certain things that I don't even address that I may not think is technically perfect or the ideal, but I'm not addressing it with the player because it's not that big a priority. There's great video of Dame, especially from the 3-point contest, and his pinky comes off the basketball. Are you willing to share anything about that?
Yeah, we don't care one bit. Like those are the things I think, and I know you agree with a lot of this. I think there's so much like gosh, and I'm probably going to piss some people off with this. I don't care. So let's clip this and put it on social media. But there are too many people out there looking for all these cute, fun, scientific ways to look smart, sound smart. Like, God, there's a great quote. I wish I could remember it, but it's like, I can't remember if Steve Jobs said it or someone else. And they're like, just because something is new, it doesn't mean that it's better. It just means that it's new. And I think
Right.
now, especially with social media, basketball, some people who haven't really even coached a ton or trained a ton, they're like trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think it's for maybe some ulterior motives. And I always say this, I'm not the smartest guy. I believe greatness lies in simplicity. We want to keep things simple. We want to keep things basic and accelerate progress as quick and efficient as we can. So whether it's Dame's pinky or maybe a guy's elbows a little bit out, like, I don't think there's just this perfect one way, right way to do it. And we have to be over analytical, over analyzing. Like, he's going, I think he's number one in the league in free throw percentage right now. Another guy I trained with, Anthony Simons, is top 5 in free throw percentage. They both sit a little bit different at the free throw line. They both have a different pace, different routine, different body type. And some people want to sit there and carve all this stuff up. Like, part of my language, I don't give a crap. Like, it doesn't, like, we're going to, the ball is going in. He's going to be one of the, I think Dame will probably end up number 2 all time in 3-pointers made under Steph Curry. The pinky hasn't affected much.
Well, and so my question then becomes, if a high school coach says, like, oh, well, Phil's saying it doesn't matter, then I'm gonna do a pinky off drill. I'm gonna tell my players to take their pinky off the ball. How do you feel about that?
No, don't do that. I think, but again, this is why a lot of coaches, and this is what we're doing. Like, we're going to have a clinic at the Final Four, free clinic for all these college and high school coaches. We do a mentorship group. I think everyone has a offensive philosophy or defensive philosophy or program philosophy. They don't have a player development philosophy, which that's what I work with a lot of D1s on. And then obviously what you and I have, they don't have a shooting philosophy. You got to know, and it's even biblical. Let your yes mean yes and let your no mean no. Like, you have to know some yeses or nos. And same thing, what you brought up, coaching players and just letting some stuff go in workouts. And you probably hate this because you've worked as a consultant just like I have with NBA teams. And there are other assistants on staff or other coaches and video. Well, why didn't you fix this yet? Why didn't you do this yet? Well, what about this? Like, we know, and I'm not saying you and I have all the answers, but we know which hill we want to die on initially, at least. We know where we're going to get the most bang for our buck. And I think that's so important to have a philosophy and have some conviction, which you could tell I'm getting passionate now and excited about, and have some conviction for what you want to do. Because the other thing Dame does, people talk about how the ball actually drops off and then he flicks it. He's done that since he was like in 6th grade. No one ever taught him that. He's just really good at it, but it's more important. And I'll share this. People, I don't know if I've ever shared this publicly. He had such a low release point in college, more important than the ball, where it was coming off his hand. And we always want it to come straight and strong off our fingertips, but it's more important for his elbow to go through his shoulder to increase his release point. If his elbow goes up and through his shoulder, which he's improved dramatically, over the last 5 or 6 years, that's more important than if that pinky was out or not, because the ball would have never had enough height or depth to go in the basket. Sorry, you got me fired up on that one.
I love it. I have those moments where I'm just like, no, I'm going on a tangent here, and you can't derail the train. I love everything that you're talking about because, like, this is a habit that in some ways I teach it because I do a drill to remove the pinky from the ball on occasion in certain situations for players. I would never encourage a player to do that in a game, especially a young player, because they usually have smaller hands and you've just removed surface area to control the ball. But it works for him. So why would we change it if it works for him? And so many people, they want to change an idea to make it textbook perfect. Well, no, The guy is a 42% 3-point shooter some year. Like, why would we? He's the best free throw shooter in the league. Why would we change a habit that he can execute well just because it wouldn't be on the cover of our theoretical magazine? It drives me crazy.
Coach Dave, here's what people don't see too. And I think this is so important in getting people to perform better on or off the court. You just brought up his hands. I would ask some of these coaches, have you ever shook hands with him? Do you know how big his hands are? Are they like Anthony Simons and Dame's? They both have big, strong hands and fingers. Like a lot of guys aren't built like that. Their hands aren't. So you want to try to get this guy to shoot just like this way. You don't know how these guys are built biomechanically, or even, whatever you want to call it, dimensions of their hand, size of their fingers. Things go into that where the majority of human beings aren't going to have as strong of hands or big of fingers. So it's just, you brought that up, but it's just such a good point, because I remember the Spurs came to scout Dame in college. We were at Portland State. The Spurs scout, George Felton, hell of a scout, great guy. I go over to talk to George at shoot around, and he goes, Lillard's hands are huge. That was his first evaluation. And he's around like Kawhi Leonard, who has extremely huge hands. So things like that affect this. And I think too many coaches, they want, again, a black and white answer, or, hey, just do 1, 2, and 3 and it's going to work. And obviously life and basketball doesn't work that way.
We are coming up on your heart out, which it really hurts my heart to interrupt this. It is genuinely, Phil, like truly such a pleasure to listen to you two talk. Like, again, I've just met you. Dave has said, no, he's an expert. Dave, also an expert. To just like be a fly on the wall and have like a moment here or there with two experts in their field is genuinely a delight. I hope all the coaches listening have been taking notes and really considering, because this is all of this stuff is useful for any level, whether you're coaching 10-year-olds or 30-year-olds. It's all there. Thank you very much for doing this. And if you're up for round 2, like, again, I would love nothing more than to just sit here and listen to you guys talk for another 45 minutes or an hour.
I think it was a blast. Yeah. I mean, I have the utmost respect for you guys. I love what you're doing. And more importantly, I love why you're doing it. So maybe we need a part 2 and we could drill each other, some more questions and go back and forth a bit.
Well, my goal with the podcast is not to have everybody on, but to have the people that I respect and love on. And I'd rather have Phil Beckner on every 2 months than have a random guy that I don't really know, but he's got a big social media following, which leads me into usually a Matt question. Phil, where do people find you?
I do a little bit on social media, not a ton. Instagram and Twitter, you could just search my name, Phil Beckner. We also run a little bit of a motivational type thing at Be Better, Be Different. That's a nonprofit, as well as high performance consulting, just kind of mindset approach, leadership, things like that. So either Phil Beckner or Be Better, Be Different, they could find me there.
Amazing. I really hope we don't get an explicit tag on the podcast after some of the salty language, but we'll let it pass, right? So, yeah. Coach Dave, as always, where can the people find you?
You can find me at Coach Dave Love on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And then I want to just float this out there for the 18 people that are listening right to the end of the podcast. Like, my short-term goal for the next couple of years is to do a coaching retreat with Phil Beckner, and where we do a deep dive into shooting, because I think the things that I don't necessarily do great in shooting, he does extremely well. And I think we could do a comprehensive weekend coaching retreat. And I'm going to put that idea in Phil's brain and then just see how people react to the idea. So let us know what you think.
Just right now, take my money. Thank you very much again, Phil, for coming on. Coach Dave, is always a pleasure. Please subscribe, like, tell your friends, and send us feedback, whether it's commenting on the YouTube video or DMs to these guys. Just please let us know how you feel. Let us know if this helped you. And thanks again for coming out. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Take care, guys.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Coach Dave Love Podcast. To stay up to date with our future episodes, please remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to sign up for Coach Love's free shooting newsletter on CoachDaveLove.com, and be sure to follow him on social media. You can find him at Coach Dave Love.